CollabTalk is a copyright of Collaborative ABA Services, making a difference in children's lives.
Hello everyone, welcome to CollabTalk, a new talk series by Collaborative ABA Services that provides information and resources about autism and everything in between. I'm Alicia, the founder of Collaborative ABA Services, and I have some of our amazing team members here. Team?
I'm Katie, I'm an occupational therapist.
I'm Bree, I'm a BCBA.
I'm Meg, I'm a licensed social worker and registered behavior technician.
So today's episode, we're talking about transitioning back to school with autism and special needs children. Mm-hmm. The back to school season can bring about a little bit of anxiety for both the child and the family, including if a child has special needs or not have special needs.
Yeah.
And also we know that changes in routine can be present, which may require some additional support. Mm-hmm. With thoughtful planning and collaboration, the transition can be smoother and more positive for everyone involved. So we want to make our favorite disclaimer. Please note that this episode is not a critique or to endorse any specific educators, providers, or families. Our goal is simply to educate and empower by helping parents, caregivers, as well as educators prepare for the upcoming school transition. So team, let's get right into this topic. Let's start talking about understanding the challenges.
Yeah.
So what are some challenges for a child on the spectrum in transitioning back to school?
I think the biggest one is changing routine.
Yeah.
Like they may have had summer school over the summer, so they may have had 5 or 6 weeks of summer school, but now by the time they go back to school, they've been out of routine for a while, and I think that's always really tough for kids with autism.
Well, even the routine transitioning back to school, working in the school system before, there were so many kids that just kept going back to the classroom from last year,
right?
Or wanted to take the same route to the classroom,
Right.
So just kind of getting out of that routine as well,
Right.
Especially if you're transitioning from, say, preschool to kindergarten, that's a big
Oh,
difference.
Yeah.
So I feel like getting used to the routine of, okay, what is kindergarten like? There's more sitting down, there's more pre-academic. So I think it's kind of like you mentioned, getting used to, okay, what did I do when I was at school last year versus now?
And same with elementary to middle school or
Oh,
middle school
yeah.
to high
Those
school,
big
because
changes.
then in middle school there's the bells and changing
Right.
classrooms and
Maybe a whole new building.
Lockers, all that drama.
So there's also a lot of changes, even down to considering our kids that have the sensory needs, right?
Yep.
So now they're going from in-home environment, they're going to be in school where they're going to be exposed to a lot of different people as far as other children, other adults. Now we have to kind of think about the volume, right? In regards to in the lunchroom or in regards to the classroom. Thinking about if they have fire drills, so
Right.
those type of sensory overloads as well, even down to the meals that they offer at school. Is there going to be any planning around the meal time? Are they going to like the school lunch, or do they need to pack their own school lunch? So there's a lot of from a sensory standpoint that could be a challenge in returning back to school. Any other challenges that come to mind?
I think just overall, at home, it's a more controlled environment typically compared to school. There's a lot of uncontrollable outside things where maybe it be noises or other, communication, interactions with social interactions with peers. There's a lot of other.
There's also other people.
Right,
if you're an
right.
only child, or if you have just a single sibling and the house is kind of quiet and you go into a classroom, kindergarten classrooms now can be 18 to 20 kids.
Yeah.
That's a big difference for a lot of kids.
And also thinking about those communication barriers. Some kids on the spectrum may have deficits or limitations in how they communicate. So also thinking about that being a common challenge, and thinking about when they're returning to school, if they use an AAC device, making sure that device is going to be ready to go to school.
Right.
Is a prime example, or if they use PECs or pictures, making sure that you have a copy for the school as well.
Yeah.
So thinking about communication in general can also be a challenge as well. Is there any other common challenges that you guys can think of?
I mean, this one might be more specific to children with special needs, but I think the first time families go through the IEP process or the PPT process or getting services started, sometimes kids will have supports when they're in preschool, but some children go into the IEP and PPT process into kindergarten. So it's their first look at special ed and all those other kind of supports. So that could be challenging too.
Right. Good point. So I think the next area to kind of think about is how can parents or caregivers prepare at home for this transition to the new school year?
I think it's important to attend like those open houses and the opportunities to go see the school, check out the classroom, or if that isn't offered, because sometimes it's only offered, in kindergarten or with transitions to another school, maybe request that so the child can become a little bit more familiar with who their new teacher is, making sure their sitting arrangement is gonna, work out for them, that they're close enough to the board or close enough to the door. They can, find out where the bathroom is from the classroom and work out that routine or the routes to the classroom.
And speaking of routines, like preparing at home,
Yeah,
right?
I was
You're gonna
gonna
say the
say.
same thing.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
I know with my own kids, it's even just like the sleep schedules and our routine at home to prep for the change of the school year. Like, yes, we're gonna have to be waking up earlier. We gotta go to bed a little bit earlier. So kind of prepping for that way before school is starting, so that way you're already in that routine at home. So it's not all the change all at once the night before school starts.
Yeah, that's really tough. And kind of like you mentioned too, Alicia, with like the communication, like if you use PECS or if you AAC, like going to that open house is great because you can even take a picture of the classroom or you can take a picture of the front of the school. So you can say, hey, remember, in 5 days we're going to go to school. Remember, this is your teacher, this is your classroom. Using those pictures to get into like a visual schedule or a visual routine can be really helpful. Even if it is just wake up, have breakfast, play, go to the bathroom, like even if it's only 5 or 6 things, like that is helping the kids get ready to see the passage of time for a visual schedule.
Yeah, and there's a lot of apps out there. I'm not going to mention any specifics. There's a lot of apps out there that help you build a visual schedule that can carry over into school too.
Yeah.
And even like putting them on your child's tablet, like they have control of it, and it's like kind of fun to check off their morning routine or their evening routine.
There's lots of free things online too where you can make one and print them out.
Yeah.
If you have a laminator, you can laminate them at home.
Social stories are great.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, especially if like they're going on the bus for the first time and things like that. So yeah, something I found helpful too at home, I think, with our kids is letting them pick out stuff for their snacks and lunch, so we know they're going to eat because it's things that they want, and that's something that is predictable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And like picking out other things, like maybe if your child needs a new backpack or something, like getting them involved in that, I think gets them a little bit excited and knows that like, okay, I'm going to school soon, I'm going, change is coming, but it's okay, it's exciting change.
And for that like emotional regulation piece, like having that control, right? So if there are like knowing that, okay, what is going to be the harder parts for my child, and then what are the things that I know that they can have. So maybe I want them to eat, say, a more well-balanced lunch, but for the first week of school, they can just have, granola and whatever, because that's going to make them happy, they're going to eat, and then I know that that's not something I need to worry about. And then as they get into the routine, and that's less difficult, okay, now I can shift their lunch back to really what I'd like them to eat. So you can kind of like, you don't have to do it all at once. So you can kind of give and take, and it makes it easier for you as a parent, but then also the kids, it's less stressful all around.
Right.
And also in preparing your child too is maybe a role play, like practicing different routines or different scenarios at home. So then when they do experience it in the real world or at school, they kind of know how to respond.
Yeah.
So thank you for those sites or key points for preparation at home. The next thing to kind of consider is also, I know we talked a little bit earlier about school, Meg, you were talking about communicating or collaborating with the school. That's another important piece when we're helping families transition back to school and just being more prepared. Definitely what you said, Meg, about like, previewing the environment prior, like you were saying, like seeing if you can visit the classrooms is really huge, or even Katie, when you were saying like taking pictures of the classroom for the social stories are very huge, because it's kind of like, it helps reduce those level of anxiety for the child, and also the child knows what to expect.
Right.
What are some other ways that parents or caregivers can communicate or collaborate with the school in planning for that transition back to school?
Well, I know a lot of schools have like a meet and greet, right? Where like they can do similar to what you're saying, like go see the classroom, meet their teachers, kind of see where their classroom's gonna be. But I know sometimes those are like really overwhelming because like everybody's there meeting and greeting, so that's really a lot of stimulation. So I think, reaching out to your school and asking like, hey, can we come 10 minutes early? Can we come 10 minutes after it ends, so it's like a little bit quieter, especially if your child gets overwhelmed in those situations. And it might give you more opportunity to just grab a couple pictures for those schedules.
Or you can reach out and ask questions. Like I know I've had parents that their child may have some sensory needs, but say they don't get an IEP or they don't have any supports. They can even just send an email to the teacher being like, hey, Susie has difficulty with X, Y, and Z. Like, what do you think? Do you have, like, and the teachers, most of the time, this isn't the first child they worked with that has challenges, whether it's sensory, behavior, special ed, regardless. And so they can say, oh, yeah, I do X, Y, and Z. Like, you can have that conversation with them because everybody wants to help. Everybody who works with children wants to help. And so I think that everybody's pretty flexible with trying to provide for them and support.
And I think the other thing is never hesitate to give that information to your child's teacher or whoever may be with them, just because, like, as Katie was saying, like, it's an opportunity to inform everybody and get everyone on the same page. Yeah. As an educator, I would be so appreciative, like, oh, my child's really nervous. Typically, this is how they're acting. Like, it's more information, the better.
Yeah, and I think, too, like you were saying, if they're going into kindergarten and they're getting their first IEP, if they have home services from an ABA service company such as ourselves, maybe making sure that you have like what's called an ROI, like the right of information, so that your team can like help you communicate those things to the school. Like, this is what we do for behavior support at home, and it seems to be working. Maybe it would be helpful here. And as a parent, you're allowed to share all those documents as well. But if you want some extra support, making sure that everybody's allowed to communicate with each other to have support.
And I know for some of my families, they've been hesitant to kind of share some of the more challenging pieces of it, whether it's a behavior or whether it's aggression or something like that. But I think it's important, if you're comfortable with it, to share, because then they can be prepared. I know that working with the children that I work with, if I know that that's going to happen, I'm aware of that. So I know that, there's some of the warning signs. Like, I know that this potentially could happen, so I can shift what I'm doing, versus if I don't know, I might ask something of a child or do something that will push them past their comfort zone that I didn't know. And then I can react to it, but I'd rather prepare for it just to be sure.
Right.
Yeah. So having those early conversations with the school team is very imperative, especially, if your child has special needs. And also finding out who are the key people that will be working with your child. Like, if your child does receive special education, kind of finding out who that special education case manager is that is working with your child, as well as the social worker or, their regular education teacher. Those key school staff that would be part of implementing their IEP, you definitely want to make sure that you reach out early in the school year. So that everyone's on the same page. Awesome. So another thing to consider is looking at how parents or caregivers can support the emotional and sensory needs of their child during this transition. So what are some ways that they can support? I know one way, in kind of thinking, we talked about the sensory pieces earlier. So kind of like identifying what those sensory triggers are, and also like those coping strategies. Like, for example, we talked about earlier about like fire drills or overcrowded cafeterias, or like what you said, like in a school, like their classrooms might be larger as opposed to at home, it's just them in a smaller environment. And you might have a kid that has sensitivities to loud noises or even bright lights, or even certain textures. So definitely, looking at what works for your child and identifying those triggers and making sure everyone on the team is aware.
I think too, like, if they have some items that are really reinforcing that you can send to school with them that would be helpful, or like, little fidgets that, help keep them in their chair longer or attend longer, and sharing those ideas or sending the materials to school, I found have been helpful too.
And I think being conscious of kind of thinking about, like, it's a funny way to say it, but kind of like school is sort of like kid work. So if you think about when you come home from a busy day at work, you don't just, or so you have to do something right away. You don't kind of jump into it. You're like, take off your jacket, you take off your shoes, you kind of decompress. So giving kids that moment when they come home from school to have that. I saw something on Facebook where there was a parent that they made like a little cozy cube, and they would give their kid a snack, and they would give their kid their tablet, and they'd go into the cube, and they'd like hang out for like 10 minutes and like do their own decompression.
Nice.
So I think giving your kids space when they come home, knowing that like they've been asked to do a lot. They've had their transitions and changes a lot, and it might be hard or it might have been okay, but giving them some space to be like, all right, let's all just take a break. And then step into, okay, now we have to go to soccer practice, or now we have to do this. But like having that buffer versus getting home is, okay, let's get ready right away. It can sometimes be overwhelming for everybody.
Sounds nice. I could use that.
And
Give you a
also,
cheese stick in your tablet.
Yeah,
That's
great. Thank you.
and also encouraging your child to advocate for themselves,
Yeah.
like, you know, encouraging them, working with them on asking for help,
Yeah.
you know, as needed, for example, or requesting a break or space, because we're installing those early skills that we might work on at home, but we can generalize them into the school setting.
100%.
So another item to think about is looking at after-school support and also consistency in schedules. So I know you just mentioned
Yeah.
about
That's
after
perfect.
school, right? Letting
Yeah.
them kind of compress or decompress and kind of get their bearings because they've been asked to do work all day.
Yeah.
What are some other after-school support that parents or caregivers can consider?
I think keeping in mind that you can keep things calm and comforting, but you can still follow a routine, right? You
Right.
still have your nightly routine. You're not asking them of anything. If anything, it's more predictable for them and is more comforting and calming, knowing like, okay, I go home, I get to go decompress for a minute, and then I play outside, then we have dinner. Like understanding that those expectations and are part of the routine, I think it's really helpful, and kids really do strive off of routine.
Yeah.
Right.
I also think too, you could look into like if your school has any after school support services. I know my parents worked, long hours when I was a kid, so I know that I went to the before school services and also after school. I think it was called like Clubhouse or something at my elementary school. But if your child is able to, seeing like, do they have like an after school homework program where the kid can have a snack and do some of their homework, or do they have like a play group where my kid can go outside and play, like seeing if that's available at your school. As a parent, if you're a single parent or a parent that works longer hours and needs a little bit of extra childcare, that's available in some schools.
Right. And also, with consistency, just maintaining those routines at home. Also, making sure that you maintain communication with the school so that you're always in the know. So, for example, like if your child had a rough day at school, there's some type of way of communication. Sometimes the schools have apps, or they might have like an email system that you can communicate with your child's teachers, and they can kind of give you a heads up on how things are going with your child. And that can also be helpful because if you know if your child had a rough day, you can kind of be prepared to kind of be supportive for them when they get home and kind of process, what's going on for them.
Which is also helpful for kids that are nonverbal.
Yeah.
Like, as a parent, so how's your day? Like, that child's not going to be able to share it with you.
Right.
But if you know that, like, X, Y, and Z happened, then you can have some more awareness of it.
Like we've seen like communication booklets, like we used to
I
do in
love
the
those.
clinic too, because it also gives you the opportunity, like, giving them an update for the next morning, right?
Yeah.
Like, we had a rough night, we didn't sleep well, those types of situations, so that way the educator knows the next day, like, okay, what to expect. Again, it's keeping everyone on the same page.
Which you can ask for. I know we talked about it in one of the previous episodes about like school supports, but as part of like the PPT process, if you have a child that's nonverbal or a child that doesn't communicate, you can ask for that. You can say, hey, can we please create a communication booklet so I can write you notes of what happened at home, or hey, I'm sorry they didn't eat breakfast, like I packed it with them, and then they can share the information as well.
Yeah.
So that ongoing communication is very important. So some key points to kind of wrap up today's episode is for parents or caregivers to keep in mind that every child's transition back to school will look different, as each child is not the same. The goal is not to remove all challenges, but we want to actually plan for them and also partner with the school so that your child feels safe, understood, and they come to school ready to learn. So are there any other key points that we can take away from today's episode?
I think also taking it day by day, right? Especially those kindergarten transitions, or going to a new school is a big change. And just because maybe that first day was a little bit hard, the next day is a new day, and especially kind of trying to keep and suppress some of our own anxieties to help them, like, yep, it's going to be okay. Tomorrow's a new day. Like, really just taking it day by day, because it is a big transition, and give space for everybody to get through the transition.
And to take a step back too, like if you normally have a very busy schedule, it's okay to cancel some things that first week of school so you can just focus on getting into that routine. I know a lot of my families for OT, if their child is going, say, from preschool to kindergarten and they were coming during the day and now they have to switch the afternoon, we take a break for that first week so they can get used to just going to kindergarten. And then once they get into that routine, then we can restart services. So it's okay to take a step back and just focus on that. That's okay.
I agree.
Well, Thanks, team, for summing up some key points. For caregivers, family members, or providers that are watching today's episode, thank you, everyone, for tuning into our episode of CollabTalk. If you find this information valuable, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and also hit the bell so you don't never miss an episode. Got thoughts or questions? Please, by all means, drop them in our comment section. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, let's just keep this conversation going. To learn more about Collaborative ABA services, check us out on our website at www.collaborativaabaservices.com. And we also have an online store to kind of also help spread the word about autism awareness. So also check our store out, which is also located on our website. And additional social media pages to kind of see what we're up to is on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and
TikTok.
Oh yeah, TikTok. Until next time, thank you for watching and have a great day.
CollabTalk is a copyright of Collaborative ABA Services, making a difference in children's lives.